So another one of the modded classes. In today's video we're going to be building the Mindweaver Psionic Warden. This is essentially your Spellblade, your psychic powers Spellblade. This guy is going to focus on dealing melee damage, but at the same time he's also going to be casting spells. The spells are going to be accompanied as well by the melee damage that you do. So essentially the gist of everything is that you cast spells. There's some proficiencies or character feats or features that this character has, that every time that you use a spell you are allowed to then use bonus actions to deal damage. Being that the case, if you want to multi-class this character, it is a very good idea to multi-class it into a thief, for example. A thief that would allow you to have 2 bonus actions, meaning that if you have a hasted character and you can cast one spell, then a bonus action as an attack, then one spell, a bonus action as an attack, that's ideal. However, for this video we're going to be focusing purely on making just a regular basic character that's full mono level for this mod that we have right here. So then again, this is a modded class, the Mindweaver. You can find it on the mod manager, and then we have the Psionic Warden in here. We have already built the Force Blade, the Void River, and the Psionic Warden. I think that we're just missing the Astral Seer, which we'll be building later on. As for the cantrips, nothing really important in here. The Cerebral Enhancement, this is actually very useful. You are going to be using the Psionic Blade Infusion, because if you use the Psionic Blade Infusion, that's going to allow you to turn your weapon into a magic weapon, meaning that your attack rolls and damage rolls are going to be coming from intelligence. However, this is also a little bit subjective. This character, you can lean it forward into being either a dexterity character or being an intelligence character. We're going to be using dexterity weapons, so I'd say that it's a little bit better to focus on being an intelligent character, because that's going to allow you to also increase the attack rolls and the damage rolls of some of the spells that you have available. So yeah, the dexterity, we're going to be using it. Yes, we are going to be using dexterity, but the main reason why we're going to be using dexterity, that's going to be for armor class and initiative, although initiative is not going to matter that much either. So essentially your character is going to look different on certain different acts of the game because of the items that you have access. So remember that you're going to be respecting your character. On the first act of the game, since you actually can get to level 4 on the first act of the game, your dexterity should be at 17. That should be one of the priorities, that should be one of the focuses, and as a matter of fact, the main focus on everything for your character is going to be on having dexterity 17 and intelligence 16. This is ideally how your character is going to be looking at most of the time. For the most part of everything, you are going to have a little bit of a downscale on your saving throws for strength, wisdom, and charisma. This is not very advisable. Remember that this is only for the first act of the game, because we want to have a little bit more of our constitution in here so that we can withstand a little bit of punishment. But then you can either decide to do not have the negative saving throws on either wisdom, charisma, or strength. That's going to be up to your personal preference. On the second act of the game, however, you're going to downscale all of your strength right in here. You're going to increase your constitution, because on the second act of the game you're going to be using the gloves of dexterity, meaning that your dexterity is going to be fixed, and at that time your saving throws are not going to be that bad, because your character is going to be looking something like this. On the final and third act of the game, you have access to the Amulet of Constitution, meaning that you no longer need to have those extra Constitution points right there, because we have access to the Amulet of Constitution. And it is at this point where you can decide to have your saving throws something like this. I like to have a little bit of charisma, because I like to make charismatic characters, so this is ideally how your character should be looking like on the final act of the game. The first spell that you should take as a must, because that's going to be a quintessential part of the build is going to be the magic shield, or the shield in here. Essentially, this allows you to use a level 1 spell slot every time that they manage to bypass the difficulty class for your armor class on their attack rolls, the enemy attack rolls, meaning that if they hit you, you're going to use this as a reaction. That's why you're going to be saving your reaction specifically for the shield, which is going to give you armor class by 5 for a 1 whole turn, meaning that you only have to activate this once, so that the entirety of the turn you have plus 5 armor class, meaning that this character can reach up to 30 armor class once you reach the end game. Meaning that the only way that the enemy can deal damage to you is by critical hits. Very, very powerful. And then I like to have a little bit more of DPS right here with the Cognitive Ruin weapon damage. Cerebral enhancements at level 3. I like to take the Fleets of Mind because that gives you extra mobility on the battlefield. On level 4, very important. This is when you get your first feat. As for the spells, don't worry about the spells that much. You most of the time are going to be getting them all. Just take whatever that you feel that it gives you more DPS, like for example the Synaptic Sever weapon damage. It's also a nice idea to sometimes take the whole person because this is very powerful, one of my favorite spells. Spells are tailored up to your personal preference, but here you're going to be taking the Moderately Armor. Remember that we have Dexterity at 17, which is why we can have Dexterity to 18 right here. Now, on level 5 is when your character is mostly established as a Spellblade, because that's when you get access to the psionic energy. So basically what that does is that every time that you cast a spell, then you can use a bonus action as an attack. And then as the cerebral enhancement in here, I like to take the cerebral amplification because it gives you bonus attack rolls, damage rolls to your cantrips whenever they are needed. You're not going to be using them that much, but whenever you are needed, you need them if you're on spells. It's very useful to have that extra damage on your cantrips right there. We could also take the Mind Strike Repost, however we already have the shield, so no need for that. Now, as for the spells, you are a little bit restrictive in here because you're only allowed to choose one spell as you level up. My advice is that you choose whichever one that you would like to take. There's many good options in here. So for example, we have spells in here that silence the enemy, so you can be taking spells that manage the flow of battle by CCing the enemy, which is very, very useful. Or if you want to go for a little bit more like DPS, you can use the Astral Assault for weapon damage, but also you can be using one of my favorite is the Mind Warp Onslaught, because this allows you to select several targets and it's going to deal the weapon damage, which is going to be enhanced by your intelligence, but it's also going to be giving you 2d6 psychic damage as well. And remember, this is AoE, so it's very useful. As for the cerebral enhancements, they don't really matter that much right in here. We have already taken the ones that we would like to take. I like to take the intellectual agility because we're going to be raising our intelligence to 20 later on, so that's extra initiative right there. As for the feats for your character on level 8 and 12, this is where you're going to be increasing your intelligence all the way to 20 to increase your attack rolls and damage rolls. Now, what you're going to be taking as a must for cerebral enhancements level 9 is going to be the Astral Dominance, because that's going to allow you to add your intelligence modifier to every single spell that you cast to increase the damage that you deal with them. Very useful. And then you continue just leveling up until you manage to reach level 12, where you're going to be choosing your final spell, which is not going to be of that consequence. Like I said, I also would like to take the Dominate Well, because this is very useful whenever you're fighting a specific something. So yeah, it's very useful. It requires concentration, something to have in mind as well, but the ability improvements to raise your intelligence to 20, this is where your character is finished. And so for itemization, it's very simple. We're going to be using medium armor. That's why we chose moderately armor right there. We have +4 to our armor class based on our character in here. So our dexterity is 14, meaning that we can get +4. Remember that you can get exotic materials armor on the second act of the game, and links on the video description on how to get those. That is going to raise your armor class all the way to 22. And then to 21. We're using the Cloak of Protection to have it on 22. We have the Hell Dust Boots and Gauntlets. Those are a little bit more DPS and sustainability for concentration spells. We have the Strange Conduit Ring whenever you're using a concentration spell, which you should be, you're getting more damage. The Killer Sweetheart to get critical hits on demand. Like I mentioned, the Amulet of Greater Health to be able to sustain more punishment and more concentration. As for the weapons, you should be using something that allows you to use a shield and that you're proficient with. I like to use rapiers, so that's what I'm using right here. And the shield, it doesn't really matter what kind of shield you're using, and remember that you do need to have proficiency with shields. I have proficiency because of my background. So there are some classes that are not going to have that much of a chance to have the proficiency. I think that the class already gives you proficiency with shields, if I am not mistaken, but at this point you have 25 armor class plus the 5 from the spell. And that's basically the gist of everything. It is very powerful because your psychic powers not only deal damage, but they also have CC potential. So you can be silencing enemies, you can be holding person to critical hits on demands, you can be doing all kinds of spells with your all kinds of different things with your spells, but also they give you mobility because they deal damage while you are teleporting throughout the battlefield. Your spells are focused on dealing just pure damage, pure raw damage, while at the same time CCing the enemy, which is very powerful. And remember that every time that you cast a spell, you also get one bonus action as an extra attack. Now your reactions, you should never be using them because you're going to be saving them for your shields, your magic shield, your mage shields. So my advice as well is that you turn off all of the reactions and just leave on the reaction for the shields, because that's the one that you're going to be using only. So the level 1 spell slots, which you have 4, that's what you're going to be using the level 1 spell slots for, meaning that you get 4 turns of 30 armor class, and then the level 2, 3, and 4 level spell slots, you can be using them to deal damage. And as a matter of fact, I would even argue that you can be using the level 3 and level 4 spell slots to deal damage, and save the level 2 spell slots whenever that you feel that the fight is prolonging a little bit more. And you can also dilute the shield when you have lots of health. You don't really necessarily need to use the shield, or whenever you feel that you're going to get CC'd, that's when you can decide to use the shield or not. It's very malleable, the playstyle with the shield, so you have a very powerful character that deals lots of magic damage as long as with melee damage, and that it's also nearly unkillable because of the high armor class that it has. Anyways, if you like the content, the like and never super appreciated. Not only you there, you are just a beautiful person. You are indeed a gorgeous, beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.